Good evening. It's 6 o'clock on Wednesday, June 15th, 2016. Welcome and thank you for joining us tonight for the English edition of Aura News, where we bring you today's top stories translated into English every weeknight. Prime Minister Rama gave a press conference after a meeting he held with U.S. Ambassador Donald Liu. He reconfirmed that the majority will maintain its position regarding the DP's condition for reserved seats. The Democratic Party is asking for reserved seats in 2 justice institutions that will evaluate the judges. The Prime Minister reiterated the position that there will not be reserved seats for the vetting institutions, adding that this is not only the stance of the majority but also of the U.S. and EU. The Prime Minister listed the court's decisions for the January 21st case, the Girditz case, and the trial against the DP chairman, saying that those decisions show the need for the justice system to be reformatted. Mr. Rama declared that the current justice system is crooked, that the Democratic Party elected 16 out of the 17 Supreme Court judges, and that the judges were selected with a simple majority of 70 votes. While expressing in favor of the 2/3, the Prime Minister declared that the current justice system is controlled and that the majority accepted the 2/3 because they do not want a justice system controlled by politics. However, the Prime Minister says that there is still time for consensus regarding the Venice's Recommendation 88, which is the hotly debated point stopping the reform approval. The Prime Minister had this to say: "It's not important how I and the DP chairman are reading the Venice's recommendation. The reform, in order to be adopted, needs the approval of the EU and the US. They read the recommendation by themselves. If they had read the Venice recommendation as the DP reads it, then the situation would be different," declared the Prime Minister. The Democratic Party chairman held a press conference shortly after the Prime Minister's conference, where he stated that the opposition is determined not to vote on the reform. He feels the reform as it is allows the Prime Minister to take control over the justice system. He reiterated that Venice's Recommendation 88 is the only way out for a consensual reform. The Democratic Party chairman asked the Prime Minister to reflect once again and accept the Venice Recommendation 88. "I ask you to reflect and calm down. The Democratic Party and I are ready to give Albania a justice reform that is politically independent. You should remove the only obstacle by completely accepting Venice's 88th recommendation, not partly," said Mr. Basha. He added to his statement that the Prime Minister wants to control vetting by planning a judicial reform that can be politically controlled. The Prime Minister responded to the DP chairman's invitation saying, "Thank you for the invitation to calm down and reflect, but you should make this invitation to the US and EU, not to me." The U.S. ambassador to our country has not visited the Democratic Party headquarters since June 8th, when the U.S. Embassy expressed its regret for the failure of the Prime Minister's and DP chairman's meeting. But on Wednesday, the DP chairman held separate meetings with the ambassadors to talk to them about the opposition's stance for the judicial reform. At the time when the constitutional amendment draft was adopted, which paved the way for the full passage of the reform in Parliament, the former Prime Minister Salih Berisha warned that if unilateral voting is allowed, the country will destabilize. The former Prime Minister has been part of the process of judicial reform and has been personally updated by the ambassador over the development of the process. Mr. Berisha accused the Prime Minister of manipulating the international partners. The former Prime Minister expressed his conviction that no one from the Democratic Party will sell their vote. "I don't think there will be any vote leakage. I condemn Rama's efforts to destabilize. He should not impose on us about powerful decisions," warned the former Prime Minister. Berisha invited the Prime Minister to stop setting deadlines and to sit and discuss with the opposition to find consensus. The former Prime Minister praised the role of the Assembly Speaker, who, according to Berisha, played the role of negotiator between the parties. Commenting on the tapping issue, he considers it to be the biggest scandal in the past 25 years. Mr. Berisha accused the State Police Vice Director of blackmailing the prosecutors to close the issue and asked the President to gather the National Security Council. I'm asking the Prosecutor General to investigate the Vice Director of the State Police as he has been threatening the prosecutors. He is connected to crimes. I am asking the President to gather the National Council of Security. The Prime Minister has tapped the President, the Democratic Party Chairman, the Assembly Speaker, MPs, and journalists. He cannot escape from the unconstitutional act he has committed, declared the former Prime Minister. Prime Minister Rama held his weekly meeting with the Assembly Speaker Ilir Meta today at the Assembly building, only a day after the Albanian Parliament's Ad Hoc Committee on Judicial Reform adopted the draft of constitutional amendments. The meeting lasted around 60 minutes, but none of the parties made any official statement regarding the meeting. Yesterday, the Assembly Speaker asked that the judicial reform be adopted with consensus and expressed his readiness to make efforts to reach an agreement with the Democratic Party regarding the only point of disagreement, the reserved seats. The Prime Minister and the Assembly Speaker also held a longer meeting of the ministers on Monday. The weekly plenary session, which is held every Thursday, will not be held tomorrow. The Assembly has not officially notified why the plenary session will not be held. Some sources told Aura News that the causes are the small number of bills up for discussion and the absence of MPs who are in France to support the national team, which is playing tonight against France. The sources say that there are only 2 bills on Parliament's agenda. It seems as though Albania's representation in Euro 2016 has eclipsed the urgency to approve the judicial reform, which is in its last moments. On Thursday, the parties were expected to confront the only point of disagreement they still have. The International Monetary Fund mission arrived in Tirana to analyze the current performance of the Albanian economy and the government's program. The first meeting of the IMF mission was held early in the morning with the Minister of Finance in his office. We have learned that during the hour-and-a-half meeting, the IMF representatives discussed the revenue's performance with the Minister of Finance. The recent 5 months figures shows a positive performance of tax administration, but also the economy's condition. The business climate remains the main concern as expressed publicly by the IMF representative. After meeting with the Minister of Finance, the IMF mission stopped for a short meeting at the Bank of Albania with its governor. The performance of the economy, also the monetary policy, and the impact of the policy on the economy, especially the topics of lending and consumption, were among the issues discussed between the IMF reps and the BoA governor. In the afternoon, representatives of the IMF discussed the budget on a technical level. The budget will be reviewed in July, and unlike the past 4 years, there will be no cuts, rather a reallocating of funds. The IMF mission will stay in Tirana until June 28th, when a joint press conference will be held to give their impression on the economy's condition and the recommendations given to the government. That's all for our English edition this evening. Please join us again Monday through Saturday at 6 p.m. for your local news in English. My name is Mari, and on behalf of Aura News, thank you and good night.